Okay, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is 5 p.m. on October the 12th, 2021, and this is the opening of the Parks, Recreation, Human Services, and Public Safety Committee meeting. We'll call it to order. We are joined by committee member, Council Member Lydia Savadasan, as well as Council President Susan Honda, Council Member Greg Baruso, who is a member of the committee, will be joining us a little later. Is there any public comment, Ms. Janicki?
No, there is not.
None. All right. We'll move forward then with committee business. Is there approval of the September 14th, 2021 minutes?
I approve the minutes as written.
All right, and I'll second that. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So now we're moving forward with the item B on the agenda, which is South King Housing and Homeless Partners 2022 Work Plan and Budget. Ms. Bridgeford.
Good evening, Chair Kochmar, members of the committee, and Council President Honda. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening, and I will actually not be doing most of the presentation. We're joined by Angela Sanfilippo, who's the executive manager of SCIP. I'm going to cover just a couple city pieces before I pass it off to Angela, and then we can both take questions. So first, the item before you, as you just heard, is the South King Housing and Homelessness Partners 2022 Work Plan and Budget. And the policy question before you is, should City Council approve the proposed SCIP 2022 Work Plan and Budget? With that, when you look at the staff report, the financial impact does identify that there's been a small increase to that membership cost for 2022. That is going to be covered with other existing budgeted funds, so no additional allocation needed for 2022. Though I would just note that for future years, there will need to be a budget increase. And Angela will also touch on population calculation, which is how that membership is determined. It's based on our population. We anticipate that that will be higher in future years as well, and we'll need a larger allocation for participation in SCIP. But for 2022, we'll be able to do that without any additional funds. And then with that, I will pass it over to Angela, who joined SCIP as staff either right at the end of 2019 or the beginning of 2020. So we're thrilled to have her, and she will walk you through the work plan and budget. And Angela, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for the great introduction. Angela Sanfilippo, as Sarah said, I am the executive manager with South King Housing and Homelessness Partners. Here we are. And I am just going to walk through an overview of the 2022 work plan and budget as approved by our SCIP executive board. Our process has been to draft priorities with our staff work group, which has representatives of all of our partner jurisdictions, as well as the SCIP executive board that also has representation from each of our members, leading to a draft plan and budget that was adopted by the executive board in July, on July 23rd at our regularly scheduled meeting. But consistent with the SCIP interlocal agreement, each partner's legislative body also needs to adopt SCIP's annual work plan and budget. And that's really what brings me here tonight to talk to you all about. So this is going to all of the SCIP partner jurisdictions throughout this fall for approval. Just to provide a little bit of grounding, I wanted to talk through SCIP's mission. It really provides a broad, high-level description of our purpose to work together and share resources to create a coordinated, comprehensive, and equitable approach to increasing housing stability, reducing homelessness, and producing and preserving affordable housing in South King County. In order to achieve that mission, we've identified 3 overarching objectives that really help to guide our work plan process. These include sharing technical information and resources across jurisdictions to promote sound housing policies, coordinating public resources that will help us to attract greater private and public investment for affordable housing into South King County, and then lastly, providing a unified voice for advocacy around shared priorities and goals for South King County needs at a local, regional, as well as a statewide level. In terms of the work plan itself, I broke this down a little bit in terms of some reoccurring work plan items. These are in 3 kind of bucket areas: governance and administration, policy and planning, and outreach and education. And that's how our work plan is broken up. But I wanted to just talk a little bit about the things that you'll see year over year that we continue to do in each of our annual work plans. So this includes our annual work plan and budget process that we are right in the middle of. It also includes quarterly progress and budget reports that we share out with our executive board and staff to just show the progress that we are taking to meet each of the annual work plan goals. We also added a new item here to provide annual updates to stakeholder groups as well as non-SCIP partner cities. So this is really a similar form to that quarterly progress report, and being just kind of a one-pager that highlights some of the work that we've done throughout the year to share with stakeholder organizations as well as other South King County jurisdictions that may not be members of SCIP. The policy and planning side of work includes building funding support. So thinking about building funding support for SCIP's Housing Capital Fund, we've pooled some public resources, but really recognizing that we need to do this in partnership with other entities. So I'll talk a little bit more about this, but one way we're doing that is establishing a nonprofit fundraising arm for SCIP, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We're also supporting housing policies and strategies across our jurisdictions that address displacement, fair and healthy housing, as well as embed and track racial equity. And then in addition to the SCIP staff work group that supports the executive board, I also convene a group of land use planners from across our SCIP partner jurisdictions. These are city and county staff that really work on the land use side of things. And we started this partnership with a joint effort for a South King County sub-regional housing framework made possible by House Bill 1923 grant funds. And we've continued that coordination and collaborative space, even with the culmination of that work as the land use planners really think about adopting their housing action plans and then move into implementation of those plans. And then coming up here soon, working on the comprehensive plan updates and really thinking about housing, the housing element specifically. In terms of outreach and education, throughout the year, we represent SCIP at local and regional forums. This really gets at providing that kind of unified voice, as well as speaking to the needs and opportunities in South King County. We have monthly executive board educational topics, helps our executive board stay up on emerging issues, policies and programs that our jurisdiction partners might be pursuing, or other emerging issues at the regional or county level. We also work with our partners throughout the year to provide broader education and engagement opportunities for elected officials, stakeholder groups, or other interested parties throughout the region. Each year, we also adopt state and federal legislative priorities, providing us the opportunity to reach consensus on some key priorities specific to SCIP's mission and goals. And then lastly here with the outreach and education, we also convene a group of South King County joint planners and developers. This group meets every other month throughout the year, and it's a space for affordable housing developers, as well as city and county human services, as well as land use planning staff to coordinate and talk through shared priorities or emerging issues, just really a space outside of project-specific work to provide coordination between the development community and our local government staff. In terms of areas of ongoing focus, so these are things that we are working on this year that will continue into the 2022 work plan. This year, we spent a lot of effort establishing our first SCIP advisory board. So we went through outreach and education as well as recruitment efforts, and excited to say our first inaugural advisory board was appointed at our last executive board meeting in September, and will hold their first meeting on November 2nd. The advisory board really plays a key role in informing the decisions of our executive board and bringing in community voice into that decision-making process. We also have been working throughout this year on building an administrative plan and structure for the Housing Capital Fund, with the goal that we will have that plan adopted towards the end of this year or the very early part of next year, and have our first funding cycle in 2022. In terms of building funding support, I mentioned this briefly, but we established a SCIP 501c3, or we are working on establishing a SCIP 501c3. We do have our Washington state nonprofit status, but we are in progress of getting the 501c3 status through the federal government. In addition to that, we're building marketing materials and a case statement to reach out to funding groups. This is really specific to philanthropic or corporate investments throughout the region to build that private investment that would add to the public resources that are already pooled with the SCIP Housing Capital Fund. Also working on better understanding barriers around increasing construction for affordable housing. So this really plays into that key area of work around convening that South King County Joint Planners and Developers Group, helping us to identify where there are barriers and where there are opportunities for local governments to address some of those barriers. We're also working on an effort to inventory and assess existing preservation programs. So this is a space for us to think about existing policies in place across the region, how we can learn from each other in terms of those programs and build on what we have to make those more robust. And then lastly, inventorying and monitoring for affordable housing that's vulnerable to market pressures. We're building on a body of work that was done as part of the South King County Regional Framework to identify kind of a snapshot of that affordable housing inventory, but looking at building that inventory of both regulated as well as unregulated affordable housing across the region so that we can better track and monitor our progress around addressing displacement and increasing affordable housing throughout the region. And then in terms of some key areas that have been identified in the work plan that are new, we do have this annual work plan process, but one of the key areas to focus on for us in 2022 is to develop some longer term goals and objectives. So this is in the 3 to 5 year range, helping us to better track our progress and accountability to our partners in terms of our long-term goals. So we are fairly new, as Sarah said. I came on board as the first staff member in 2022, really trying to stand up some key pieces of our work, but thinking also really important to think about those long-term goals, building sustainability of our organization. And then also key area here in terms of partnering with organizations and area experts to better understand the connection between our mission and homeless services, outreach, and best practices. So we've really been focusing on the affordable housing side of our mission and really building some educational opportunities to really understand the connection between affordable housing and homelessness services and other challenges. And then lastly here is using an equity lens for development and implementation of all aspects of our plan. We really will be leaning on our advisory board to help us with a lot of this work. That's why we're really excited to have that group stood up. We were very intentional in our outreach and priorities for who was appointed to the board in terms of really reaching into South King County communities and being representative of all of our different partner jurisdictions, as well as the communities that are most impacted by the affordable housing issues in South King County. And then moving into the SCIP budget, we had a couple key priorities for the 2022 SCIP budget. The first one being working towards a balanced budget. And this is really goes back to our first year in operation when our first budget was adopted before staff was hired and before the City of Auburn became the administering agency. So it was really a projection, and each of the jurisdiction contributions was a projection in what our operating costs would be. But with the hiring of staff and Auburn as the administering agency, our operating budget and our jurisdiction contributions were never exactly balanced. So we have been spending down some of our cost savings from the timing of staff being hired to sort of address that deficit. But working over time, as Sarah mentioned, there'll be an increase in 2022 and working to make incremental increases to our jurisdiction contributions over time, while also spending down our fund balance to reach that balanced budget. I see there's a question. Do you want me to pause for a minute, or should we wait till the end?
We can wait to the end for me. Keep going.
Okay. In addition to working towards a balanced budget, identified priorities also included 2 full-time positions. So currently the executive manager position is full-time, but we have a 3/4-time program coordinator. It was a priority to move that to a full-time position to increase capacity, staffing capacity. And then lastly was to incorporate a compensation structure for our advisory board members. So this is very new in terms of our budget, and our recruitment and outreach efforts this year did not include this as part of standing up that advisory board. But building in a line item to our budget really allows our executive board to have these further conversations around what that compensation structure will look like in the future, reaching towards a goal of providing compensation so that we can hear from folks that maybe might not normally be able to participate in something like that, and creating a little bit more equity across the board for advisory board members. So you'll see on the chart here, these are the population tiers and the contribution levels for 2022. So as Sarah indicated, right now, Federal Way's population, according to OFM's 2021 projections, falls just under that 100,000, but certainly moving towards that 100,000 mark. So there'll be some potential increases there just based on the population tier. And then this is my last slide. This is just to show you all of our jurisdictions and the contributions that are in the 2022 budget. You'll see that King County for the unincorporated population contributes at that 100,000 or above level, but then they also contribute an additional amount that brings their contribution up to a flat rate of 75,000. With that, I am happy to take questions, and I did include my contact information there just in case. I think you probably all have it, but I will stop sharing and happy to address any questions you may have.
Thank you, Angela. Councilmember Sebadawson, did you want to go ahead?
Sure. Thank you, Chair, Coach Mar, and thank you, Angela, for your presentation. Several questions. One is, no, I do appreciate you stated that you're also working or bringing together the affordable housing and homelessness issues. And as homelessness becomes very a priority, and center and front. I think it's very important that you guys are looking into that. So I do appreciate that is happening. And then one question I have is the number for affordable housing need. Was it what 240,000 or whatever? I mean 200. Yeah. No. Is that the right number? I'm sorry. But has that changed? And if there's a change, do you know if it's increased? That's one. I have several questions, but I'll stop there.
That's a good question. I can look into that a little bit. I think the number you're referencing came out of the Affordable Housing Task Force, and they have not updated those specific projections and needs as far as I know. But there was some significant work done in the countywide planning policies this year to identify needs. So I can get back to it off the top of my head. I can't tell you if those exactly match up, but I can definitely get back to you if those numbers have updated in any way in terms of the need over. I think the countywide planning policy is doing like a projection for the 20-year planning period for the comprehensive plan cycle. So it may be a little bit different, but those would be a little bit more updated.
Okay, thank you. And then the non-participating cities, I guess CTAC is the one. What is the plan, or what kind of outreach are you guys performing to get them to join or to participate?
Yeah, so this was the first year we did that outreach to the non-SCIP partner cities, really specifically with a letter kind of outlining the work that we're doing, as well as a one-page kind of progress update that went from our SCIP chair, Mayor Nancy Backus, to those non-participating cities. I've also done some one-on-one with staff from a variety of those cities, CTAC being one of those, as well as Maple Valley. And part of that is just based on their interest in terms of taking us up on these offers. So offers to go to planning commissions or city council meetings to provide information, which we have done in Maple Valley. CTAC, we've engaged more with the staff at this point, and they have joined in some of the South King County Housing Group conversations. So it's great to see that their staff is engaged. And that's kind of where we're at right now in terms of CTAC. And part of that is just based on their own interest in taking us up on the offers that we've made to kind of provide more information to commissions or city council members as they ask us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And then I think in the report that I saw, and maybe this is just a minor correction on your recommendation page.
Lydia, we can't hear you.
Oh, really? How about now? No?
I can hear you.
Okay, so the recommendation page, I think Kent is missing, so if you want to update that. And lastly, on your budget sheet, the revenues and expenses, I think there's
Lydia,
a number
looks like she's frozen.
Can anybody else still hear me?
I think the rest of
now
us
we
can
can
hear
hear
you
you.
fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so continue.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. And so expense and revenue, are there numbers transposed in the expense column? So just that. And I think that's all for now. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for the presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Sabadasan. Thank you. Council President Honda.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, Angela. Can you tell me more about the advisory board? Who is on it? How it was advertised for members, and the compensation structure that you're talking about?
Yeah, definitely. I can go through the members if you're interested. I could also point you to our last executive board member if you want to read short bios of each of those members.
Okay.
If that's helpful. I don't know how much time you want me to take up, but I can certainly go through the names. And then in terms of the outreach, we did quite a bit of outreach that was based on our staff work group, identifying folks and providing introductions to some of the community-based organizations and other engaged community members throughout our partner jurisdictions to kind of provide some recommendations of who to reach out to get the word out. We also provided quite a number of presentations to existing organizations and meetings throughout the spring and summer in terms of, just being in front of people rather than just email in someone's inbox. So we relied on some ongoing and existing meetings for some of that. We also relied on some of our staff work group members and executive board members to connect with folks that they knew. And then in addition, we had information on our website, as well as information in the Housing Development Consortium's newsletter. And then each of our partner jurisdictions shared that with some of their avenues for sharing information. Like City of Burien has a newsletter that it was in as well, those kind of existing sort of sources. And I don't know, do you use the chat box? I can just provide a link to the no chat box.
I can send an email
Okay.
with the bio so you can see who the advisory board members are. And then if you have additional questions, we'd be happy to take those. I can
Okay.
follow up with that in email.
Thank you.
Oh,
And
I
the compensation,
Yes, thank you for the reminder. I didn't touch on the compensation structure. So the executive board went through many conversations about what the compensation structure should look like, could look like, but didn't land on particulars, but decided to include a line item in the budget and include budget for this item so that we could continue those conversations, but the structure itself has not been identified. So currently, advisory board members are not receiving compensation. This would be in the future based on developing that compensation structure.
so how much time is someone on the advisory board expected to put into this then, if they need to be compensated for it?
We've identified projecting about 3 to 5 hours a month.
May I add a little additional context on compensation and part of the conversation that happened in both bringing it forward to the SCIP executive board, as well as the conversation that they had around creating a structure in the future. It is compensation for boards has become a more prevalent conversation in looking at equity, especially when we're talking about community members being able to participate when they don't necessarily do so as part of their work, or if they're in other financial situations, have to pay for childcare. There can often be a cost for participation. Some people have the ability to do so, some don't. So that's part of why you might hear in lots of different settings that compensation is coming up about membership in boards, commissions. And this is one of those situations. So the SCIP board did talk about it and wanted to see that structure kind of developed and proposed before making a decision on that funding. And King County is moving in that direction. Some other cities have started funding commission participation, again, following specific structures on who receives it, how many hours, et cetera. And that would be part of the conversation with SCIP as well.
So then compensation would be for everyone on the board, doesn't depend on their income level?
It can vary based on structure. Sorry, Angela, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I was going to say a lot of these questions need to be part of that structure and had with the executive board. I will say, so it hasn't been adopted. So this is all just conversations that have been had by the executive board. But there has been some sense of having a variable compensation. So for folks, for example, that Sarah referenced, if they're participating as a representative of an organization and are paid through that organization, then they wouldn't be compensated. Or an advisory board member may choose not to, right, voluntarily sort of say, I don't need compensation, and may not take it. But none of those decisions have been made, but there's definitely been, I think, will be different variable structure based on each individual advisory board member's different needs, but I don't know if we'll necessarily collect income information.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Yeah, I'm not sure about all of you, but my audio was cutting in and out, and a lot of you were freezing up. So I'm not sure. I think I got most of the presentation. So Angela, can you tell me, so this started with House Bill 1923 that provided grant funds for this whole idea?
So the, excuse me, the work of the South King County land use planning group that SCIP convenes really started with the House Bill 1923 grant funds. That's just a small piece of some of the work that SCIP is doing, but SCIP itself formed in 2019 by an interlocal agreement that was signed by all of our partner jurisdictions and identified a budget based on just jurisdiction contributions that come out of city budgets in different ways, but was not grant funded.
Okay, is this, does East King County have something similar to this?
Yes, ARCH, a regional coalition of housing, is very similar, and we were sort of modeled after that ARCH structure. They've just
I figured that.
Longer.
Yeah, I figured that. And so who's representing Federal Way, just out of curiosity? Is there a representative on your advisory board from Federal Way or the executive board?
The executive board representative is Brian Davis. And then Sarah participates on our staff work group.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. I just didn't know that. Okay. There was one thing that you said in your presentation that I was interested in. Well, I'm trying to get to the goal. Your goal, obviously, is to build affordable housing, right? And you're trying to get public and private partnership funds to do so. And that's why you're doing the 501c3, correct? Okay, well, so part of what you also said was that your goal was to have ownership, home ownership. Can you describe that a little bit?
I think so. Some of the funding, and this hasn't been decided at this point, building that capital fund, and it'll be based on, I think I said in 2022, we'd be going through our first allocation of those funds. And in terms of home ownership projects, there certainly are opportunities through community land trusts or Habitat for Humanity that do specific affordable home ownership opportunities that may apply for funds as well. Other things, policies and programs that you might have at a local level could also address affordable home ownership opportunities. So not just around funding, but around policies and coordination on that level as well.
Okay, thank you. So my final question is, does any of this have anything to do with the rezoning that we're doing under House Bill 1220 to provide housing in the neighborhoods or in the commercial areas for homeless folks?
Not specifically, in that 1220 was really a
So it's a separate
state.
Okay, so are you kind of in tandem with that whole project? Or are you working together with that whole idea? Or I'm trying to understand how this is working.
We've been working through with the land use planners as they work to address the 1220 legislation, but the legislation itself came out of this state. So we don't have any jurisdiction over that legislative piece, but we've been convening land use planners as they tackle addressing the requirements of 1220.
If I can just add that the city's 1220 process
Thank you.
Has not been part of SKIP. While there have been discussions with land use planners, SKIP is not driving a process and is not directly part of the co-development that has occurred here.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Okay. Council President Hunter, your hand is still up.
Yes, I have another question. It's on the 501c3 that you're trying to get. So back in my PTA days, we used to have 501c4 PTAs and 501c3 PTAs, and we always tried to get everyone to be a C3 and not a C4 because of years ago, if you were a C4, you were limited in the amount of political and legislation activity you could do. So is that still something with the 501c3 where you have to limit the amount of political work you do?
Yeah.
And how would that impact your desire to have a 501c3?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is part of it. I don't believe lobbying and advocacy efforts can be part of what is funded through a 501c3. And we're really basing our goal to get that 501c3 status based on conversations that we've had with some of the philanthropic institutions and the type of organizations that qualify for their grant funds. But there is some limits around the legislative and political advocacy side, I think, for the 501c3 as well.
Okay. I know we had to be really very, very careful about what we did politically because of that. So, all right. Thank you.
I just have a couple of more quick questions. Angela, are you working out of City of Auburn, City Hall? Is that where you're working out of, or?
Yeah, our offices are at the City of Auburn.
Okay, all right. And will we be expecting another quarterly update from you periodically during the year, or what can we expect?
Yeah, so I provide some quarterly updates to the executive board, and then those can be shared with city councils and staff as well. So those are usually just kind of one pagers provided at quarterly increments. I don't know if Sarah, you can add to that, how those are shared out.
I don't know that they have been, but I'll talk with Brian Davis and we'll make sure that they're shared in the future. And I know that Angela is welcome and welcomes the opportunity, I should say, to come and speak with council at any interval. In addition to the annual touch on budget and work plan, I know that she would be happy to come out at any point that you're interested. So if you see a report and have follow-up, just let us know and we can coordinate with her.
Okay, so either Sarah or Angela, if I'm a developer and I want to work on affordable housing in one of the jurisdictions, what would I come to you? Would I just go to land use planner for that city? What would be your input with that? Would you be attracting developers? Would you just be a clearinghouse? I'm just trying to understand your function.
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit of what the developer is looking for. So if the developer is needing permits or a rezone or something like that, they would definitely be going to your city. If the developer is putting together a funding package, looking for most affordable housing projects are funded through a variety of different sources. So we would be one of those sources of funds through that SKIP Housing Capital Fund.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions, Council or Council President? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Sure. I move to forward the proposed SKIP 2022 work plan and budget to the October 12th, 2021 consent agenda for approval.
Thank you very much. I'll second that. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. And we'll just, hi, Councilmember Brusso, you're on.
Yes, thank you.
Right?
Thank you, Chair Kochmar. Sorry for being late.
Welcome.
I was on my phone half time.
Okay,
It kept
we're
cutting out on
joined
me
by-
too. Thank you.
Oh, I know. Well, we're happy to have you with us. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, we're at full force here. Thank you so much. Okay, we're moving on in the agenda to the next item. Thank you very much, Angela. Very good presentation. Thank you. All right, we're moving on to item C, which is the exciting portable toilet service contract amendment. Jason, it's all yours. Jason, I can't hear you. Maybe it's just me. Oh, no. Is it just me, or I don't think any of us can hear you. I think he's saying, wait a minute.
We can't hear you. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear John. Yes.
I may be able to jump in while Jason's fixing his, and he tries to save the exciting ones for me whenever he can. So I really appreciate that. I'm thinking this is an accident,
Okay.
and I'm thinking it might not be. And I apologize because Jason was going to do this. So it's basically just.
Do you have me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank
Okay.
God. All right.
Well, thank you I apologize. It was working a few minutes ago, and so it kind of freaked me out. I didn't do anything but sit here and put it on mute. So, but I appreciate the
Okay.
enthusiasm for portable toilets. As unattractive as they can be at times, they are absolutely necessary. And so you may remember.
Absolutely.
Policy question before you tonight, council members, is should the city council approve amending the contract with headquarters to extend the term and adjust the compensation? And so I was here about a year ago with kind of this exact same topic and thought I had allocated enough money in the contract, but COVID had different plans and we needed to adapt to COVID. And so we deployed Santa cans at most of our parks that had restrooms that we were keeping closed due to the impacts of COVID. And so that impacted us hugely and burned through our entire contract money that we thought was gonna go a couple of years. And so, as you can see, this is the third amendment. Next time we will have to rebid, but we are requesting $50,000 to be added for compensation and extending the term. And my hope is that this will last a little longer than 10 or 11 months that this last amendment did. But either way, we are still going on the contract pricing from the original RFP and bid. And if you see the rates, well, I don't think the rates are included on the amendment, but they are generally about half the cost of the going average. And so we have a real fine rate, and not too many other places can match it. And so with that being said, I would entertain any questions if there were any out there.
Council, are there any questions? Chair, council, committee? None? Council President, go ahead.
Thank you. So are the restrooms open now in the parks?
Yes, Council President Honda, they are all open in the parks. This was just more the impact during COVID. We do increase the number of Santa cans we bring in the summer too, but it truly was that kind of, I want to say it was like April of 19 through, I want to say it was about April or May when we had reopened the bathrooms completely and pulled the Santa cans out. But it was a duration of a year where you had about 6 or 8 facilities that normally have no Santa cans that had 3 or 4 stationed there, just so we had some spot. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? And by the way, Jason, they earn every dollar.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
I
so
was
not a pretty
watching,
job.
well, reading. I love archaeology, and so I was reading about ancient Rome and how they handled their needs. We're even with we're light years ahead of that. So good. Okay. Is there a motion, Council? Yeah.
Chair Coach Moore, I'll make a motion.
All right.
I move to propose amendment to the October 19th, 2021 consent agenda for approval.
Second.
All right. It's been moved and seconded to move this item to the consent agenda for the October 19th agenda. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you for letting me have
Oh,
fun
you
with
don't
that.
get rid of me that quick, Councilor
I know, I
Coach
see
Mar.
it
You got
right
me for
now.
2 more again.
I know. I see the tree services are coming up. And by the way, I need to talk to somebody about a few trees. Mine are. I've got one that's dead. Go ahead, Jason, with item D, tree services contract amendment.
Okay, council members, the policy question is, should the city council approve amending the contract with Thundering Oaks Enterprises and extend the term and adjust the compensation? And this is a very similar situation. I think I might have brought these two at the same time about a year ago. And what we're running into is, with the tree service is, we're getting a lot more calls than we have in the past. And I think it was conducive to folks being home and not traveling to work and looking out their window a little closer and things like that. And so know that kind of our stance in our urban forestry is it's a budget that's not adequate to begin with. We have about $45,000 a year for tree services, and I can tell you that number back in the 2005-6 timeframe was over about 155,000, I think. But we've been able to manage and survive on a lower allocation for over a decade. But those implications are starting to catch up with us. And so it's a combination of deferring things that we haven't had to take down immediately. And so we've pushed it back a couple of years and we monitor them and take those down. And know that our stance in the Parks Department, we're about protecting the city's liabilities. And so we also kind of consider ourselves kind of like Dr. Seuss character, the Lorax, that we speak for the trees. And it's our mission to protect the trees, because that's what when you come to parks, you think about trees, and so we do not cut down healthy trees. Period. We don't top trees. We take care and we resolve dead, diseased, or dying trees, and that can be for various different reasons. But then, if they're dead, diseased, and dying, and are on city property and pose a risk to other personal property, that's when we start removing trees. And so even if we know we have a dead, diseased, and dying tree right next to a house and it has the potential to hit the house, we're not going to cut that tree all the way to the ground. We're going to cut it about 20 feet tall so that you eliminate the hazard. It can't hit the house or whatever the personal property is, so that reduces our liability. But it also provides habitat trees for other bugs and critters and birds. And that's also what the parks are about. So although it feels like we're doing a lot of trees this year, we wouldn't be doing them if we didn't have to. And so you could see that our original contract was at 60,000. We amended, our amendment one was 88,000, and you'll see I'm asking for a pretty big increase on this amendment, and it's more than double the previous two contracts or amendments combined. And the reason I'm asking for that is we want to be ready, and I need to keep this contractor on service. And so although you're approving for that contract amendment amount, we know that we are responsible to the Parks Department budget, and we cannot overspend that budget. And so we're kind of at a point in the year right now where, hey, if we don't have to take it, we're not doing it because of that $45,000 that we have budgeted. We are over by about $1,600 right now, and I imagine we'll be a little bit. We'll probably be $5,000 to $10,000 over on that original line item. But again, for the Parks Department budget, our bottom line is fine. We're just, kind of shuffling to make things work. And so what this just does is we know that we can't spend it out of our budget if we don't have it, but Surface Water Department, Streets Department, Community Development Department, they have been kind of piggybacking on our services and kind of eating at that dollar amount. And so what we want to be able to do is have that organizational flexibility that, hey, we got a good tree service on contract and we can do it. We are approving a lot of money in that contract value, but we know we can't overspend that budget. So I think that was going to be one of the big questions that came out of the staff memo I provided. But if you have other questions, I'd be happy to entertain those now.
Thank you, Jason. You've been cutting out a little bit. So I'm assuming that you're done. I do see that Committee Chair Sevadasan has her hand raised.
You're on mute. I can't hear
Lydia,
you.
you're on mute.
Okay, sorry, I got it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. If there's a damaged or dead or diseased or oak tree on a private property, I know the city's not responsible for it, but would the city consider charging the property owner and cutting the tree down for them or assisting them in that way?
So I can tell you that we get calls lots of times that it's a tree and it's not on city property. It's private property of some manner. And so we'll provide some consultation, and they'll ask us questions, and what would our recommendation be, and we talk, and we try to provide that customer service, but generally we don't get in the business. We'll give them referrals and stuff like that, but that's a private property matter, and we don't have the staffing or the people available to take on additional responsibilities like that. So it's clean when it's on someone else's private property. We let them know that. We inform them based on their request, but and a little bit of friendly advice or consultation, but at that, it's kind of where our role stops.
Okay, great. That's helpful. And with the budget, I know you did say if you don't need it, you're not going to use it. And so, would you carry it to next year? Next year, yeah, 2022.
Yeah. So we're extending the term, and so we're looking to extend it to 2025, just to give us plenty of room. And part of that is so that we're going to have to rebid next time, and we need to go through that process. But right now, just to give us some wiggle room and the amount of pressure trees are putting on us, it would be nice to just have that flexibility to move forward, have that term extended, and just have that compensation. That way we can, let the other departments piggyback our contract and save some of that work for everybody involved.
Thank you. So, Councilmember Baruso.
Thank you, Chair Kuchmar. Thank you, Jason. Just real quick, and I know that I think you answered part of the question, but you're extending. So, but on the extensions, the tree service, their costs never go up, do they, Jason, on the contract?
So at times, right now, this contract, the rates are going to stay per the RFB that was provided several years ago, but our contract language does allow through mutual negotiation that if we need to increase costs because of the consumer pricing index, or there was a period where we were above $4 gas prices, and that was having an impact on the headquarters and delivering the Santa cans. And so one time in the middle of the term, when we were looking to do amendment, we negotiate at the point of the amendment. On this particular contract, there was no request done. It was just, we reached out to them, say, can you keep those prices intact if we extend the term and add compensation to your contract? The owner was amicable to that. And so there is not anything like that in there. But like I say, our legal language does allow for some based on that consumer price index.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council President Honda.
Thank you. Is there an arborist on staff still?
Yes, we have several. Steve used to be our big arborist, but I can tell you that we've got 2 arborists on staff right now. Jason Mormon works out of City Hall, and Joe Broughton are both certified arborists. Now, Derek Presnell, our parks manager, he doesn't have the active arborist certification, but he's got a degree in horticulture and arboriculture and has that background. And I can tell you that all I would need to do is go down and take the test. It's just a matter of, we've got some certified arborists on staff. And so, I feel I've got 25 years of knowledge in assessing and dealing trees. And like I say, no, I could go down there. But the real reason I like Thundering Oaks in this vendor, they've been a vendor for us a long time. But the owner, Bryce, he's actually was the president of ISA, the International Society of Arborists, for over 10 years. And his knowledge and expertise, and he's got a working history with us where, we've got the the neighbor, and she calls every year consistently that this tree is gonna smash and crash my house, and she's worried because it's a big tree outside of her house. But we go there and assess it, and it's not dead, diseased, or dying, and it's healthy. And so we let her know that. But then Bryce also provides and gives us certified letters to attest to the condition of the tree. That way, if we've told the citizen, hey, the tree's healthy, you're fine, we want to have some backing that way in case an act of God happens and that tree falls and hits their house the next day, that, hey, we had an arborist looked it out, he certified it, and types us a letter stating that, that's an accurate assessment. That way, it limits the liability to the city.
Okay, and then I have two other questions.
Sure.
One is when you look around trees now, the cedars have a lot of brown leaves because of the hot weather. Do we have a lot of cedars on our parks that may not survive because of the recent really hot weather?
So there is a problem going on with cedars right now, and so the two species that we have a lot of concern right now are both cedars and maples. And there's I can tell you that we noticed some stuff going on with our maples at Celebration Park. We had some significant dieback, and so we work with Washington State University Extension Campus down in Puyallup. And they've got a lab for horticulture or arboriculture. And so we have taken leaf samples, we have taken branch samples, we have taken a whole stump that took the back of one of our 1-ton pickups for them to investigate, look at under microscopes and pathogens, and they have not found anything conclusive with our maples. And I can tell you, just because of the relationship we've established with some of the people down at the Extension Campus, I brought up concerns about 2 years ago at Red, White, and Blues. We noticed some dying of the tops of some of the cedar trees in the natural areas of Celebration Park. And so we've been watching and monitoring, and we've been taking samples down there. And actually, WSU Extension Campus just received a grant. I can't remember if it's state or federal, to do some more research. And because of those relationships, those Extension Campus professors have reached out to us, and they are going to be taking a look at our park specifically and using us as a case study. So we are seeing problems and concerns. I think a lot of it is contributed to the drought, that's been occurring in this region for almost close to a decade, and so that's had that long-term impact of the drought. You're now seeing the impact and the effects, and so. As far as a solution, we're working at it, but this is a bigger global problem. It's hitting us here locally, and so I can tell you, we in the Parks Department, like I say, we're that little Dr. Seuss character, and we're speaking for the trees, and we're trying to take care of them the best we can. But we struggle to keep up with our workload, and more resources and staffing towards this cause would definitely be greatly appreciated in the future. But, I know we're balancing a lot of priorities, but I can tell you that is one area that we could definitely use help and support in.
Okay. And one more question.
Sure.
Campus Drive and the road through Celebration Park especially have a lot of tree roots in the streets, where it's its own speed bumps. The road in Celebration Park, it's like, we don't need speed bumps there because the trees have done that for us. It's only going to get worse as long as the trees continue to grow. They obviously aren't the right tree to be there because they're of their roots. Are we going to do anything about that, or just let the streets get torn up? I think it's becoming a significant issue, especially in parts of Campus Drive and through Celebration Park.
Yeah, and so two different kind of infrastructure on Campus Drive. That's part of the overlay program, and streets. Those are street trees in the right of way, and so what they're doing to remediate the issue. I don't have a full handle on, and so
Okay.
we need to talk with EJ or Desiree on that a little bit more extensive. But I do know it's happening pretty significantly along the parking lot at 7-8 at Celebration Park, and we're aware of it. And I can tell you that we had money for asphalt repairs and maintenance, and we expended everything that we had allocated towards that. And so to me, it's a larger capital program. I'm with you, Council President Honda, that it's only getting worse, and something needs to be done with it. Unfortunately, right now I don't have the Parks Department doesn't have an identified source to take care of that, and it's a larger capital project. And so Parks Commission is working on a matrix to help us prioritize the parks projects that are due. But there's been a lot of deferring on maintenance in the parks and facilities maintenance in our division. And so that's why we're kind of developing this prioritization matrix to kind of bring some of these to light, try to get council attention, and try to come up with a plan to get some of these issues resolved and look forward so that, you know, we've got a calendar plan. But I can tell you, unfortunately, right now, we don't have anything in the plan, and money available to be able to do maybe some of that work would be King County levy money, but that's the pass and trail monies, and we've been trying to do bigger type improvements with that. And so the Parks Commission developing this matrix and identifying the priorities, as well as you know, maybe it needs to be a council study session to talk about and start to plan together how we are going to deal with this maintenance backlog that we have in the Parks and Facilities Maintenance Division, because it's growing longer by the day and week.
Okay.
I
It
wish
sounds
I could
like,
give you a rosier
yeah.
story, but that's the reality that we're in right now.
Yeah. Okay. It sounds like maybe we need to do that because, you know, we did that a couple years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago at a retreat. We talked about the backlog of maintenance issues we had. And every now and then it comes up, but, you know, we haven't really dug into it lately. So,
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
No, thank you.
So, Jason, for private property, why does the circumference of the tree have to be considered a significant tree? In other words, we can take down trees that aren't significant trees. So how wide is the width of the tree have to be, the base?
I believe the caliper of the tree is anything above 15 inches is considered significant tree. And so, you know, a little bit wider than a ruler is considered significant tree. So, and that's per code. That's community development's code for the trees.
Interesting. A quick little story. Years ago, I think my tree must have been a little wider than that, but I had a volunteer growing in the wrong spot. So I read a book and I decided I was going to cut it down with my trusty axe. So I went out, and I'm telling you this so you won't do it for those people who are listening. I got in the middle of cutting this. I was all alone. I was out in the backyard cutting down this tree, doing the way the book said, when I got almost 3/4 of the way through, and I realized it wasn't working the way the book said. But I couldn't leave it because it would fall on somebody. And I thought, oh my gosh, they're going to find me here under this tree forevermore. And I realized what an incredibly stupid idea that was. So at any rate, so this year for my birthday, I've asked my adult children, they wanted to know what I wanted for my birthday. They all thought I wanted earrings. I said, I want a chainsaw. Because when we have a big windstorm and those limbs come down, which they do, I have to have something to cut them up so I can get out of my driveway. But anyway, there that is. So just a side note. So council, do I have a motion to move this item forward?
Sure.
Anybody want to make a motion?
Yes. I move to forward the proposed amendment to the October 19, 2021 consent agenda for approval.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to move this forward to the next council meeting for approval. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. And by then I should know whether I have a chainsaw or not. I'll let you know. Okay, so we're moving forward to the next item on the agenda, which is item E. Temporary work trailers for parks maintenance staff who have been displaced due to COVID-19. Jason Gerwin again.
Yeah, and so this one's very near and dear to my heart. And so the policy question before you tonight, council members, is should the city council allocate $300,000 of American Rescue Plan Act dollars to lease work trailers for park maintenance staff displaced due to COVID-19 and authorize the mayor to enter into a lease agreement? And so wanted to provide a little background is, Parks and Public Works came together very early before we even knew it was a pandemic, and we saw what was happening. And in February of 2020, we broke into smaller work groups of 3 to 4 individuals and tried to house them amongst the city so that if we were struck by COVID-19 and what we now know is a pandemic, we could still provide city functions if any individual work group contracted the virus and had to go out. And I can say that did happen twice to the Public Works Department, where their entire staff was out in Public Works, and the Parks Department had to cover their department for a total of about a month's time during this pandemic. And so basically for 19 months, the park staff has worked without a work location. They're currently literally working out of their trucks, broom closets, pipe chases. If you know anything about a broom closet and a pipe chase is even smaller and narrower than a broom closet. And so there's not much room, but literally that's where they're having to stash their lunch pail at times or things like that. And so it's been too long. We've been trying to get this in place sooner, but funding was kind of a concern. And when ARPA came down, we've been trying to get this proposal to you since then. And it's really time imperative right now as we're going into the winter season and giving our staff an ability to be able to congregate and work together and just have a place to set their lunch pail, because they don't have that now. And if you've ever seen one of their work trucks, they're dirty and dusty and no place that you or I would want to have lunch, but we're having them do it on a daily basis and for the past 19 months. And so in addition to this, as you know, as we've talked, we are searching out a new maintenance facility and making progress on that. But since COVID started, there's been wholesale changes to the way that the Steel Lake Maintenance Shop operates now. Number one, we've had to set up workstations in a different manner where, we need to be 6 foot socially distanced. Really, we had outgrown the facility prior to COVID. COVID really just forced our hands. And then additionally, Public Works has added it's more than 6 staff, but it's at least 6 staff members that now report out of the Steel Lake Maintenance Building. 3 of them are inspectors. They used to report to City Hall, but their work in that is more conducive out at the shop. Additionally, they've added landscape members and some changes that way. So, what we're anticipating as management is the new maintenance facility, we believe we're 18 months to 3 years away from being able to move into whatever iteration of a new maintenance facility the city decides to pursue. And so we just want to have these temporary trailers leased. What I can tell you is that all of these expenditures, and I'll explain the financials here in a second, but are justifiable and identified uses for ARPA money. It's exactly what the legislation was set up for, to help municipalities meet the challenges of COVID. And so this meets all those eligibility requirements, and we've been in conversations with Steve Groom as we've worked through this process. And so the financial implication are we would enter into a lease agreement, be a 3-year lease agreement. It can be prorated if we need to exit out of that. 30 days notice is needed to be provided to exit out of that lease early. So that cost is $165,000 for the lease of those travel trailers. We do need 3 of them so that we can divide into socially distant workspaces for our staff, and that puts that 4 or 5 in each of those trailers. We've got $85,000 penciled in, and that's in regard to security. You guys are all aware of what's going on at the Steel Lake Maintenance Shop, and we're trying to minimize this. And so a big cost of that $85,000 is to literally fence around it. And if you're familiar with Steel Lake Park, we have a wood shop and a pipe shed that are kind of connected, and those are our maintenance buildings out there. And so it would all be tied into that facility, those two buildings, and fenced all around there. That $85,000 does include at least one. We might be able to get 2 cameras out of it to add to the infrastructure. And we had been working with IT to get fiber down to the beach house so they could upgrade those cameras. And so we had agreed to do that work in-house. And so that's going to be a part of this project. And so we essentially have to dig a ditch, run some conduits so that we can get the fiber from 312th Street all the way down to that area. We need water, power, and sewer. And so then there's associated costs. It's about $20,000 for both power, $20,000 for power, $20,000 for water. And so that includes Lake Haven's fees for permits and hookup. And then, internal, we'll be making those water connections in-house. So there's miscellaneous unions or some parts in there in those costs. But the majority of that is the permitting fees associated with it. Then sewer, same thing, but that's only at $5,000 in that total. And then we've got site prep work at about $7,500. And so some of that's for that conduit to be able to get the fiber down to the shop. We need to get probably a couple hundred yards of gravel to get in there and just make sure the site is leveled and even to get the trailers in. And so know if there's any way we can trim these costs, we're going to trim these any way we can. But this was the cost estimates we were able to put together that we felt were conservative with that. And so I can tell you, I was out at Steel Lake Park just trying to visit some staff last Friday, and it was a little bit of a rainy day. And I got a little depressed when I went out there because, you've got our crew, they normally would congregate, but they couldn't congregate in the wood shop. And so they're all sitting in their trucks. They're wet from being outside during the day. They got their lunchbox by the wheelbarrow, and a lot of them are sitting kind of alone by themselves. A few of them will pull up and talk to each other and that, but it's a struggle for us to get together, capitalize, get those group dynamics. So really, we just need to give our staff a home, and that's why we humbly request these federal dollars to be used to offset those effects of COVID on parks. And then, like I say, if we were to exit and get to a maintenance shop sooner, we would be able to recoup some of the money on the lease at a prorated amount. So from there, I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Jason. Committee members, do you have any questions? Seeing none, Council President has her hand up.
Thank you. Yeah. So once again, we're being asked to spend ARPA money when, as a council, we haven't even had a discussion about ARPA money. And, we've already spent some of it on the grocery workers. We're going to talk about spending some of it on the police and now this. And I'm really getting uncomfortable with spending ARPA money without having had a discussion. And can this wait until we get a discussion on ARPA money? Because I really, really think that we're putting the cart before the horse. We need to have a discussion on ARPA money as a council before we continue to spend it. And it's very frustrating. I want staff to be taken care of. They deserve to be taken care of, and they should. But I also want to, and $300,000 under what we're getting for ARPA isn't a heck of a lot of money. But I don't know what the rest of ARPA is designated for, or council hasn't been asked how if we have any thoughts on where ARPA money should go, or the community. So I see Mr. Director Groom is here, and really I'm getting beyond frustrated at this point. I want to be able to take care of staff and do what Jason is saying, because I get it. I wouldn't want to work under those conditions, and I don't want staff to have to work under those conditions. I just think we're weeks, if not even a few months beyond, as a council, being informed about ARPA. So there, I've said it, and I'm just frustrated.
And Council President Honda, what I can say is that, like I say, if I could have, I would have been asking months ago to have this conversation, and John and I deliberated whether or not when we should bring this forward, and we tried to delay it as long as we can, and I didn't want to bring it before there was a plan in place for how the city was going to spend the ARPA money. But we've had these documents prepared, and we're getting into that rainy season, and I wanted to take the gamble and the risk because, gosh darn it, our parks people are worth it. And they need a place to live, and
Exactly.
so with that being said, can it wait? It could wait, but I wouldn't want it to, because I think that sends the wrong message to our staff. And these guys are out there in the rain, in the junk, and they're just boots on the ground. And so I hear your concerns, but I also felt like I'm not doing my due diligence if I don't bring this forward either.
And I don't disagree with you.
Director Groom?
But is there any way that maybe the money could come from somewhere else at this point, and then we can use the ARPA money once we decide where the ARPA money's going?
Let me
Councilor,
Yeah.
go ahead, Groom.
Yeah, Jason and John and I have talked about this, and there's two elements of it. The one question is it smart to spend ARPA money? And the second question is it so urgent that you need to make that decision before you've got the total master plan of how to spend every penny of ARPA? Because we're all very reluctant to approve a nickel here, a dime there, and then we're left wondering if we have spent ARPA money on the highest priorities. I understand that we are going to be coming to council a week from today. I think there's a study session. Tim Johnson and I and the mayor and several people have been working on master planning, collecting all of the possibilities. The total in the ARPA funding is going to be 19.2 million. This request is for 300,000. And I will tell you that this has enough urgency that I think that Jason and John are absolutely right to at least bring you the facts so that you see the operational need. And then the question is, if you greenlight 300,000 out of the ARPA money, how much of a dent does that take out of it? And next week you will be able to see the list that Tim Johnson and I and his staff have been working on, trying to get the biggest pieces, the biggest components. And I still think that 300,000 isn't going to get in the way of the big picture. So what I'm trying to say is, from my perspective, that's not a very big dollar amount in the overall $19.2 million. And I think what Jason and John Hutton need to convey is that there's a cost to waiting. Jason and John, you want to add to that?
Yes, I'll be happy to. And I absolutely hear and understand your frustration, Council President. But this human capital, they've been really suffering for almost 20 months now. We got winter coming. We had frost on our windshields today, frosty grass this morning. They report to work at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's freezing. They got no place to go. There's other components that Jason sort of touched on. Part of the reason we bring people together is we do a daily briefing that includes task delineation, prioritization, safety, all kinds of things that have been really put on the back burner because we cannot get people together. And now we have the opportunity to do that. I understand the frustration, but they've really, really been taking it on the chin for 20 months in
John,
cold weather and hot weather, and we really need to do it if we possibly can.
John, what I missed was when we consider things that are eligible for COVID, on this one, I think this is actually caused by having to implement COVID distancing.
100%. We would absolutely be together if it wasn't for COVID, and that's the reason we waited for the ARPA funding to come through. The CARES Act was gone quickly, and so the CARES Act wouldn't fund it because there was none left, and we just have to do something for these folks that are working so hard. And I understand your frustration, and I'm not trying to be flippant about that at all. Please don't hear that. But they're getting frazzled after this much time, and you know, I mean, to be honest, there's not even a place to go to the bathroom. I mean, that's almost borderline not okay.
No, it's not that I don't disagree that they need to be taken care of, because I thought when we talked a year ago or so about the state of the Steel Lake building, that there is something that was going to be done so that there is more space and it was safer for our employees. And I do think we talked about the Target building, the old Target building, if that could be renovated in some way to, you know, to have staff in there where they were safer and more comfortable. But I haven't been in there. I don't know what the condition of it is.
It is horrible, beyond horrible.
So it's uninhabitable.
Okay. I'm not an expert, but black mold, feces, and worse.
All the
good stuff.
Yeah. All the infrastructure has been ripped out. There's no electrical grid to be set up, no HVAC. The roof is literally not quite caving in, but it's not far from it. It's got numerous leaks. Yeah, it's not in good shape.
And I wasn't here for that analysis, but that sounds expensive, and this trailer option is much more contained.
Well, I guess I just want to stop having, you know, after this, let's just stop coming to council with ARPA stuff until council's had a chance to have a really good discussion. And I know it's coming to council for, it's not a very long study session next week. It's maybe 30 minutes. It's not 30, 40 minutes at the most. It's not going to be a very long study session, and it's not going to be enough to really get us to, as a council, to where we need to be to really make decisions on ARPA. So, and I know I can't be the only council member concerned about this. So, but I completely want our staff taken care of. I mean, they have a basic need and right to be taken care of. So I'm not against that. I just wish that there was another way to find $300,000 in the city's budget to have done this sooner and not to have had to wait this long.
Thank you, Council President. Council Member Baruso.
Thank you, Chair Kirchmark. Oh, I have a question for Steve, and I know we do have that coming up in the presentation. And Council President Honda's right. I mean, I was kind of looking at that too, and it's like another ARPA fund. Would there be a way in the presentation we had a study session to kind of go over what exactly we are taking out ARPA funds now, and maybe project it for, like, even when we come back to hiring our officers, to see where our total is and what we have left at all?
We absolutely can, and that's on the slides that we're putting together for next week. And real briefly, you will remember that we have approved hazard pay for grocery workers. We've talked about $50,000 for a feasibility study for broadband, and I think there was something else. But the dollars that have been approved and allocated are minimal at this point, because of the exact same reason that Council President Honda mentioned, because we're really trying to make sure that we get the big picture and we get eligibility. We still are waiting for final guidelines from Treasury. With that said, when we get around to putting everything on the table and looking at what's most compelling and what's most urgent and what is most COVID related, this one is going to be a no-brainer. I think. I want to stay in my lane. I don't want to overstep your role in making the priority decisions.
You know, I get it, Steve, but I think it's just, for some of us, you know, numbers tell a lot. If we could just put something in front of us and say, okay, here's what we're projected to spend, here's what we spent, and then we go from there.
Yep, we've got that. That'll be in next week's guaranteed. It's already in draft.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councilmember Stefa-Dawson, did you have a question?
I did, but Councilmember Baruso asked that question. But
Okay.
I do appreciate Steve for putting it together for us. And I think listing all the future projects and then being able to prioritize those in advance would also be very helpful. So thank you for putting those numbers together.
Thank you both. Well, thank you. Seeing no other questions, do I hear a motion?
I'll make the motion. Chair Kojmar.
Thank you.
I move to forward the proposed allocation of ARPA funds in the amount of $300,000 for work trailers to temporary house parks maintenance staff to the October 19, 2021 consent agenda for approval.
Second?
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your support.
Yeah,
Sure,
Councilmember,
Very much.
can't thank you enough. It's gonna be a great demonstration to our staff when we get to tell them tomorrow. It's gonna improve morale significantly in a hurry, and so thank you for that.
Yes.
Great. I was just looking at the committee recommendation. It was as Council Member Baruso said, October 19th. I believe it's October 21st is the next meeting. Isn't that right? Oh, no, it's the 19th. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It is the 19th. Okay. All right. Sorry.
Thank you, council members.
I don't remember what we said, Chair, but it is for the 19th, just to make sure that we said the right date. All right. So moving forward, thank you very much. Moving forward, we now have Chief Wong. He's going to talk about the item E, the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistant Grant, Jay, for 2021.
Yeah, good evening, Committee Chair Kochmar, Council President Honda, and members of the Council. The Police Department is seeking committee council approval this evening to accept the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant, JAG Award for fiscal year 2021. This particular award grant does not require a matching funds at all. So there's absolutely no cost to the city. And this JAG program, this funding is the primary provider money from federal government for criminal justice purposes for state and local agencies. And this money can be used for any criminal justice enhancement purposes. So we received about the same amount of money each year from a Department of Justice. And the money is, the fiscal agent is the city of Seattle. So they're actually the agent that manages the funds that come through. So if you look, you don't have to look, I'll look for you, but it's in the contract. This year, what we want to use the 2021 JAG money for is one is the, it's primarily for bomb disposal unit. So their equipment needs to be replaced. They have an X-ray system that they need to replace, and that's just over $34,000. And then a grid aim system, when they shoot their projectile to blow up the explosive, they need a new system for aiming. That's just over $4,000. And there's about $1,200 we want to use for sector. That's for issuing tickets, criminal citations, so forth. It's a system that it's a statewide system known as sector. So we want to spend about $1,200 getting some scanners for that. So that's where we want to spend our $39,000 and $550. So with committee approval, we'd love to have it go to full council on the consent agenda for accepting this federal money.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Oh, no questions. Seeing none, do I hear a motion?
I will make a motion. I move to forward the 2021 JAG Grant Award to the October 19, 2021 consent agenda for approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to move this forward to the next council meeting for consent agenda for approval. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Chief Wong. Now we're moving on to your next presentation, which is item F, Police Department proposing additional personnel and resources.
Great. I just want to make sure.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure everybody can see the presentation.
Yes, sir.
That's fantastic. Okay, so the police department is seeking council committee approval this evening to increase police staffing, expanding the take-home car program, and bonus pay for new hires. And with the changes in our public environment, now is a time to invest in the police department to enhance public safety in our community. Finance Director Groom will be presenting tonight with me to share different funding options that are available for the policy group to consider. Please feel free to raise your virtual hand and just speak up if you have any questions, just in the event that I don't see your hand. So here's the overview of the presentation. On the October 5th council meeting, I had a council member ask about comparing crime data with the surrounding jurisdictions. She thought that would be beneficial for all of the council members. So I kind of added that to the existing presentation that I made from September 21st. I will talk about that. Also at the last council meeting, question was asked about what are we doing about gun violence in our community. So I'd like to just share that briefly with you. And then changes to public safety. Why the increase in gun violence and other crimes in our region, in fact, in our country. And I'll share that with you. And then our historical staffing background. We talked about that already. I will give you an abbreviated version since second time you're hearing it. And then the police department's recommendation in terms of staffing and other items that resources that I discussed. Deployment enhancement. There's more slides with that. Last council meeting, somebody asked, where are these officers going? So it's in a written format, a little more detailed. So I'll go over that again, and then we'll talk about the funding options. The crime is surging in America, and recent survey, USA Today, showed that 60% of Americans just don't feel safe in their communities right now. So crime has become a hot topic in America. These numbers that I'm sharing with you, murder numbers, are a little higher than what I shared with you last time. The FBI actually published their crime reports for the country just recently since my last presentation. In fact, 21,570 murders is actually, it's higher than that because the country is transitioning right now from UCR crime reporting to NIBR's crime reporting. My understanding is there's numerous agencies that have not reported their crime numbers. So we know that the murder numbers are actually higher than what I'm sharing with you tonight. As a country, we have not seen these murder numbers high as this since the 1980s and 90s when we were dealing with the crack cocaine epidemic. And I'm telling you that we are in another drug epidemic as a country is why we are seeing a surge of murders and violent crimes in our country and also in our region. In Washington, we had a 46% increase in murders in 2020. We are beating the national average of 29%. In King County, we had 102 murders, 69 fatal shooting victims, and that's an increase of 27% from the previous year. And we just received the first 9 months of 2021 shots fired report from the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office. And after 9 months, we have 73 shooting victims in King County. So if you could look at 69 fatal shooting victims, all of 2020 in King County, after 9 months, we are already at 73. So you can see that we are going to finish much higher than last year. When you look at a 4-year average, King County, shooting victims are up 71%, non-fatal victims up 77%. These are unprecedented numbers that we have not seen in King County. And I wanted to share with you that we've had 6 murders year to date. Moving forward, I'm going to give you the kind of the abbreviated version because I feel that you've already had this information, and I'll be making another presentation next Tuesday at the council meeting. So I will go abbreviated, but please ask questions if you have them. So this is our total crimes reported under NIBRDS. And as an agency, 2016 is where we reported the most crime since we've been keeping track of NIBRDS. And since then, we've been able to kind of reduce our overall crime numbers. Now, back in 2016, we saw a huge surge of population in our community, just like we're experiencing now. There was a 3,000 growth in 2016 and 3,000 people growth in 2017. So we definitely felt it at that time. We're also saw about a 5,000 population increase from 2019 to 2020 as well. So you can see the crime numbers, and in 2020, our crime numbers did increase. These bars represent the total crimes reported, but I would tell you that even 7995 crime, it's just simply too much. Okay, and we need to work towards lowering these numbers. Here's our persons crime for the past 5 years, 2016 to 2020. And then here's our property crime. So we saw a slight decrease in 2020 with persons crimes. We saw an increase with property crimes in 2020. Now here's our comparing with jurisdictions of decent sized cities surrounding our jurisdiction. So this is 2020 NIBRDS crime data that's published in WASPIC. So these are published numbers that came out this year. So Tacoma had over 27,000 total crimes. Tacoma is just over doubling Federal Way size as far as population. You can see the Kent number at almost 13,000, Renton at 8,265, Federal Way just under 8,000, and Auburn had under 8,000 as well. So that's total NIBRDS reported with cities comparable size. Some of these cities are bigger, but bigger cities in South King County and in Pierce. Then here's the murder numbers for 2020. Tacoma had 32, Auburn had 10 last year, Kent had 9, Renton and Federal Way had 6 murders in 2020. Here's persons crimes. Federal Way had 1,354 persons crimes. You can see the chart. And then property crimes, Federal Way had 6,365 property crimes all of 2020. So that gives you a good picture of what's happening with cities around us as well in terms of crime. Okay, addressing gun violence. For one, when we have a gun-related crime, significant gun crime, that becomes a priority within our agency. That means sometimes other cases may not be worked on as much, but bottom line is gun violence creates a lot of fear in the community, and the quickest way to stop gun violence is to arrest the perpetrator as soon as you possibly can. So we prioritize, make it a priority within our agency. We have increased our patrols with a council authorization of $214,000 in overtime funding, and we've had some success. This was in part because of the shootings that we were having in Westway. I'm very pleased to report that the steps that we've taken there with safe city cameras, increased patrols, we've been able to clearly reduce gun violence at that neighborhood. We're also proactive working Pacific Highway where we had some gun violence. We're working there. So we're into it probably about 2.5 months or so. And we've been able to add approximately 4 more officers per day into our patrol visibility with the funding that council, authorized back in June. Also, we use crime analysis data. Our crime analyst prevention coordinator does monthly report to the entire supervisory staff, so we know where the crimes are, where the hot spots are, and then we work on it kind of for the duration of that month. But she's constantly providing us information, so we're putting patrols where we know where we have increase in crime or illegal activity. We work with the federal agency as well as state agency with the NIBIN, the ballistic connection. So quite often we're able to connect shootings in other jurisdictions with shootings in our jurisdictions with bullet casings. So we use that as a resource, and we've been able to use that to solve crimes as well. And then we participate with DEA and VNet. We have a detective assigned to a regional task force with rising drug activity in South King County. I shared with you last month, there's ridiculous amount of drug that's coming into our community and communities in our region. It's one of the main contributing factors for the gun violence. People are killing each other with these drug deals. And so we definitely put a detective there to address drugs that's flowing into our community. And we work with the prosecutor's office with trying to identify prolific offenders, more aggressive prosecution, stiffer sentences, higher bails. We do work with them when we have shooting incidents. We participate in intel meetings regularly. Our crime analysts participate, and we have a pretty good idea who our shooters are in South King County and in the Seattle area. We ongoing juvenile delinquency prevention programs, and then expanding our Safe City and license plate reader technology. We've been doing this for a number of years. We've been expanding our Safe City and license plate readers, and it has paid in dividends in terms of us solving crimes. You may recall a newspaper carrier that was shot, and that our license plate reader obtained the plate. We were quickly able to solve that. That's just one example that gives us the edge that most communities don't have the robust Safe City cameras and license plate reader cameras that we have in our city. And we don't disclose which intersections have the license plate readers. So one of the things I need to share with you in terms of changes in public safety is why is there increase in gun violence, particularly this year, and why the lawlessness, and why do our residents, like many Americans, just feel unsafe in their communities right now? And then changes in our public safety environment compels us to take action now. And some of the things to make our community safer, and some of the things is really, one is rising population. We're seeing a huge boom in our population in Federal Way. We have rising violence through our region, and also the key element here that we constantly hear, and I think our general public understands that now, is just reduced offender accountability. It's not just one thing, but there's multiple things that's been building up. And our crime is getting worse with offenders having less accountability. So I talked about population. We're at over 101,000 population, and that's a year and a half ago. And we know the population is bigger than that today. Based on that figure, we have currently 1.36 officers per 1,000 residents with 137 officers. And we know that with light rail coming in, Malone and Geyer, the Commons development, and other development that's coming in, we know our community is going to continue to grow, and we need to plan ahead, because if you make the decision today, we are out significant time to get to the number of the officer ratio that we're looking for. We can't turn on a dime. It takes some time and investment. And I talked about less accountability for criminal offenses creates more feeling of this immunity among offenders, emboldening their actions to harm others. Their actions are becoming more brazen and frequent nationwide. The number of officers getting ambushed and officers getting shot here is significantly up from what it used to be. So one of the things that I can share with you is over time, there's just been less prosecution of felony crimes, particularly with property crimes. Over time, the threshold for prosecuting felonies has gone up. Bottom line is the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office just simply doesn't have the funding. They don't have the capacity to prosecute all the felony crimes or offenders that are brought before them. So many cases are dismissed, other avenues are taken, and that lack of accountability has made a difference. And juvenile crime is, I can say the same thing. In fact, King County is working towards, zero incarceration of juveniles. And I can tell you that 28% of shooting victims are juveniles. And that ratio is probably the same for the number of shooters. So what we're looking at is, I don't know what the answer is, but that's where we're headed. Less accountability for juveniles who commit violent crimes. We've had cases where we've had juveniles commit drive-by shootings, yet we cannot get them locked up. So creates sleepless nights for law enforcement. Jails are accepting fewer arrestees, but the biggest thing is for property crime, pretty much they're not being held. They're immediately being released back into our community, creating repeat offenders for particularly crimes like, property crimes. And we've had to actually prosecute under misdemeanor, our municipal court, to get some jail time because we had individuals repeatedly breaking retail store windows, breaking into businesses. We just simply couldn't get them locked up under the King County system. And I would tell you that more and more inmates are being released at the state prison, and also at the federal level. So those are all contributing into the crime and lawlessness in our region. Another area is the significant police reform laws that add to this mixture. House Bill 1054, House Bill 1310. These bills need to be amended. We want to make our community safer. Offenders are literally getting away with crime. I've shared with you that these bills have tied our hands. Just today, I was reading an incident in Auburn where they had 2 carjackings. And while officers are waiting for probable cause, one carjacker suspect got away coming into Federal Way. The other carjacker suspect, they did get PC and make an arrest. Why make it harder for officers to do their job? If we got reasonable suspicion, we should be able to pursue, we should be able to stop them and arrest them. Why do we have to wait for probable cause? It makes no sense. It makes good police work more difficult for law enforcement officers. I can tell you in terms of auto theft, it is not good for us here in Federal Way. Since the law went into effect, House Bill 1054, we've had, as of October 6th, we've had 26 criminals just drive away, elude us and drive away, knowing that we cannot pursue them. So before, criminals didn't know which agency would chase you for what crime or what crime they wouldn't chase you. For example, King County had a no pursuit policy, period. And other agencies had very restrictive policy. But one thing that the criminals didn't know is if they eluded the officers, they didn't know which agency would chase you or not chase you. Well, these criminals aren't stupid. They know now that this is statewide, that no agency is going to chase you for a stolen car. They're not going to chase you for a commercial burglary. They're not going to chase you for other property crimes, and even persons crimes, they're not going to chase you. So they're just simply running from us. And particularly in the middle of the night, we would use tactics to arrest auto thieves, and they would be connected with drive-by shootings, robberies. Middle of the night, when people are running from you, they're not good people. They're really bad individuals. And that ability for us as law enforcement has absolutely been taken away from us. I know that I'm not the only police chief to speak about this. We feel this way collectively as all police chiefs. WASPIC has taken a stand on this. It is a problem, and I hope that our elected officials at the city level speak to our state legislators. We must amend these bills as soon as possible. We cannot let the criminals have the upper hand. And I shared with you, stealing a vehicle is a precursor for committing other violent crimes. Another bill that's created a big problem for us is engrossed Senate Bill 5476, essentially decriminalizing all felony drugs, heroin, cocaine, fentanyl. We have more people dying from drug overdose from fentanyl and meth in King County than COVID death. It is a crisis. It is a huge problem. I don't know why you would make these drugs legal when it's a crisis for our citizens. People are dying. People are shooting each other on the streets trying to make money on these drugs. And the criminals are now emboldened to just carry these drugs because they know the worst thing that can happen is a law enforcement officer giving them a brochure, asking them to go get treatment. The system in place right now is not working. There is no plan. If there's a plan, it certainly hasn't been implemented. And if there's a plan, as a police chief, I don't know what that is. We're seeing it on the streets every day. Council, mayor, police chief, we get complaints about people using drugs on the sidewalk, storefronts, and we really don't have tools to deal with it right now. Before, at times, we would make an arrest. We would put them in jail, probably saving that person's life. We know of a couple of success stories. People who were committing crime, drugs. My officers told me that I wouldn't even recognize them if I saw them today. Why completely remove police from the process of saving people from our community? Share with you, much of gun violence has nexus to drugs, drug transactions, drug rips. 2 weeks and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, we had a shooting on 320th. They were doing a drug deal on the side street. He got shot up. He's a drug dealer from Tacoma. He wandered out into 320th for help. So here's our auto theft numbers, and our auto theft victims. I've had an email just last couple of days, pretty upset about having their car stolen. 2 separate incidents, emails to the police chief. I haven't had that kind of complaint from our residents, but look at our numbers. We had June, 48 auto thefts. So 50, around 50 has been our trending number. And 54 in July, 66 in August, 110 in September. Criminals know that they can steal a U-Haul, trailer, any vehicle. We can't chase them. They just keep driving. When auto thefts were up to like 100, and in King County, they actually did something about it. We started locking up auto thieves back then. This is many years ago. There was a concerted effort countywide because auto theft got out of control. When we started locking people up back then, guess what? Our auto theft numbers went way down. I don't know what's an acceptable number, but it was at 48. It's more than doubled in roughly 2.5 months, 2-3 months. There's no doubt with auto theft numbers, I can say that it's direct correlation to House Bill 1054. And Federal Way is not the only community. We're all feeling it statewide. Okay, historical background on the numbers. 2006, we had 118 officers, 15 record specialists. Today, because of the Great Recession, we had to reduce our staffing numbers, but we were starting to increase our numbers for a number of years. In 2014, since 2014, we've been increasing, and today we're at 137 police officers, and we have 10 record specialists, and we're looking to increase these numbers. So the mayor and police department recommendation is we go to 150 officers. We're asking council to authorize hiring 13 additional new police officers. That would bring us to 1.49 officers per 1,000 residents. We're asking for 13 additional vehicles for those officers. We're asking to increase 2 record specialists. We desperately need these positions. And then 15 additional vehicles that would give all of our patrol officers a take-home car that would enhance our operation. It would help us recruit new hires, retain our tenure officers, more agencies in our surrounding jurisdiction. And just about every agency in Pierce County gives a take-home car. Renton, Kent gives a take-home car. Kent recently increased their pay 16% in an effort to recruit and retain their officers. We are in a staffing crisis in this anti-police climate that we're in. I'm pleased to report that I feel like conditions are improving for the police, but that nevertheless, in that environment, we've lost people. I've never seen out-of-state agencies recruit so hard in Washington State. In this current environment in Washington, they're actively recruiting officers from Washington. So that I've never seen before. So here's how we want to deploy the 13 officers. 6 patrol officers go to patrol. As the community grows, more calls for service, we just want to add 1 officer per squad. 4 PROACT officers be part of our special investigations unit. I'll explain a little more here in a minute. 2 more to our special operations unit, 1 officer to traffic. So in patrol, that's the backbone of our police department, 24/7, 365 days a year. We never take a rest, period. So we would add 6 officers just to beef up each of the squads, of the 6 squads. So PROACT is part of our special operations unit. They would be for gang suppression. We have gang officers. They would work highway downtown emphasis, narcotics investigation, drug houses. Bottom line is these officers would have, they're not tied to the radio. Supervisor and the officers would target, address drug houses, known problem locations, what we call problem-oriented policing. And we're at a point that a unit like this would be a tremendous benefit to our community when a complaint comes in or we know of vice activity that's going on. We can do a lot more. This area is an area that we haven't done as good as we could. Special operations unit, bottom line is we have 6. Currently 4 are assigned, but we want to increase it to 8. And this unit's going to be our bicycle unit downtown. They would work special problem areas. When we have to go get worst of the worst offenders, special operations unit would assist detectives to make the apprehension. But a general rule, we need a bicycle unit in our core downtown as it grows, especially when light rail comes in. We're going to need this visibility to deter criminal activity, and we really need this unit. Traffic officers, they're busy with abandoned vehicle complaints, working known traffic problem areas. If there's a fatality, collision, serious injury, accident, these are the specialists that respond middle of the night investigating those type of collisions. They need special skills. And they also do our school zone view and school zone photo and photo enforcement program as well. And then our record specialists, they do a lot of work. And I shared with you that we used to have 15 record specialists, and we don't want to get behind in this area that's going to come back to bite us, because there are state statutes, state codes that we have to be able to keep up. They do all of the data entry, and they also help solve crimes, provide information to our officers in the field, and they're force multipliers. So we're just simply at a point where, with our agency growing, we just simply cannot continue to do with 10 record specialists. Anytime somebody's out on vacation, sick time, it creates a staffing issue for us. We desperately need these 2 additional positions. And I won't go down the estimated cost. Now it will be Director Groom's turn, and I will, let's see, I need to exit here. Stop share. Director Groom, it's all yours, sir.
Chief, we do have Councilmember Seven Dawson with a question for you.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Chief, for this presentation. I think it's the most comprehensive I've seen, and I wish you could have this presentation or present it to the public, because the comparison is very useful and helpful. A lot of times when, especially during public comments, it always sounds like Federal Way is experiencing the highest, the worst case scenario. So seeing those comparisons and saying that our city is really not that much different from the surrounding areas and we're all experiencing this will be very helpful, I think. So if at all possible, that information going out to the public would be great. So to one of my questions, well, actually you did answer one of my questions. I do like the bicycle officers unit because I was going to comment on that to say they would be perceived more as being friendly because they're in the community. They are visibly there, and they're almost. I see them as being someone who proactively, like you said, can just spot something and just go check in with them and ask what's going on, or So I do like that idea. In one of your presentations, you said you were showing the crime rates where Federal Way was at 79.95 for 2020. But the graph, the percentage increase, it has a 4% increase. If that's in comparison to 2016, then I don't understand the 4%. So if you could explain that to me. If you know which slide I'm talking about, actually.
Sure. The crime stats you're talking about is from year 2019 to year 2020. So from 2019 to 2020, the overall crime rose 4% in Federal Way.
Okay, so each year we're comparing to the previous year.
Correct. And you can see kind of the downward trend. And then in 2020, we actually saw crime increase by 4%. And I could tell you that these discussions are occurring in other communities. I know we're more focused at Federal Way. I was talking to a police chief the other day. They had 4 homicides in a single week. And I can tell you, talking to other chiefs, particularly in South King County, we're all experiencing similar things. And I shared with you King County gun violence numbers just to illustrate that this is not isolated to Federal Way, but it's a regional problem.
Yeah, and council understands this very well. It's just that the public perception is such that it seems like Federal Way is going down this path alone when it's really regional and possibly statewide. And like you've said, it could be attributed to what's come down, House Bill 1540. But and like you suggested, hopefully something would come out of them seeing the unintended consequences from that bill, and hopefully they'll be working on it. It's my understanding that that's going to happen, and let's hope that. One thing I saw in Seattle, I was around Alaska Way recently, and I came in contact with an ambassador of sort that just walk around the community, walk around down Alaska Way, just making sure they answer people's questions, and also they're there just to watch and observe. And if they notice anything that's questionable, they could report quickly. So they are just out there, and they wear a shirt that says ambassador. Now they're paid by the chamber, not necessarily by the city. But I think that also would give our city a better image of us being more proactive. So maybe we can coordinate or collaborate this with the chamber. One other comment I wanted to make was around the zero youth detention, and I am involved in a lot of those meetings. And it doesn't necessarily mean, or doesn't mean that the youth should not be arrested. It just means this group, what they're trying to do is follow these kids or start from when they were little and look at their circumstances and make sure that there is supportive programs, resources, people around them so they don't go down that path. And so, and make it so that you have no youth going to prison. And some crimes could be where maybe they are arrested and they're under house arrest. Some crimes could be where there is some kind of a maybe group home or something within their community that could serve these youth. And the reason behind it is a lot of youth grow up without having that role model, so supporting them in that way. And number two, if you put them in the jail or prison system, then they are less likely to come out healed and whole and wanting to join the community. Whereas if you have this other model, then you're gonna see a positive outcome where these youth would have someone to go to, or somewhere where they're not removed from their grandma and their mom or that community, but at least there's some normalcy around them that could help them develop and make better choices. And so just wanted to touch on that. You probably know that already, but I just wanted to make it clear or clarify that it doesn't mean youth that commit crime, especially the kind of crimes that you're talking about, it doesn't mean that they should get away with it and not have consequences. But it's to really get to the root cause of those problems and see how they could be supported before it even starts. So just my comment, and thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
I feel like we're talking about apples and oranges. I'm just simply talking about youth that are involved in gun violence, and they're shooting people and they're roaming on our streets. And I understand our criminal justice system right now is more focused on the offender, but what's quite often left out in these discussions are the victims and the community. People are terrified. Doesn't matter to me what the age is, but when they're starting to pull those triggers, they need to be off of our streets. They can't be shooting people and not be locked up.
No, I'm completely with you. I'm just saying you brought up zero youth detention, so I just wanted to clarify. It doesn't mean they should not go to prison or they should not suffer consequences for their action, but it's how do we help them make better choices before they get to that state. So that's all I was trying to explain. But yeah, thank you for your presentation and the all the information that you provided us tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sabadossin. Councilmember President Honda, Steve Groom is still waiting to present his portion of the. Did you want to talk about finances, or do you want to go to ask Chief Wong a question?
I have a question for Chief.
Okay.
Thanks. So, thank you for the detailed information, and I'm hoping next week that this is what the public will hear, if not even more, if you have more to share. I'd like to talk about our schools and drugs and weapons in schools. What is our role as a city police department in that? Do we offer any education on how dangerous drugs and guns or knives coming to school are? Do we have any, are we allowed to go into the schools and talk to the youth about better choices and where they can go for help if they need help? You know, I realize that a lot of, well, not a lot, but some of the issues we have are because young people are making bad choices for one reason or another. But how can we help them not make those bad choices when we have the high schools that we do in our city? I mean, we used to have programs that, like the DARE program, we used to do that. What are we doing now, if anything?
Sure. I would tell you that our school resource officer program, I mean, we partner with a school district, school administrators, school security officers. When we become aware of potential dangerous situation, we immediately, take action. I would tell you that what's happening in our community, our society, in schools, is microcosm of, what's happening in our society. Is there a potential threat for gun violence or others? Absolutely. That's why we have the officers there to mitigate and potentially reduce those opportunities. So, if we become aware, we're going to immediately take action. And they also serve as mentors, and so does the teachers, and we're all working together. But currently, with the level of, gun violence, it could really happen in any community. And one thing about school shootings, it's not always in poor communities or, it's happened in affluent. That's one area that kids bring guns to school for a variety of reasons. They bring it because they're afraid, they're part of a gang. It's very possible they can't bring weapons, and it's an open campus. So, but any intel, any information, we got to act on it, and we all work in partnership. So, but I hope that answers your question. I don't, there's no foolproof system of preventing, violence at schools, but we're all working hard, to prevent that.
Okay. No, I know people are working hard, but I just don't know exactly what it is that the schools are doing to start with the little ones and talk about the dangers of drugs, the dangers of guns, and so that they, as they grow and they're offered, hey, this will make you feel good. Why don't you just, one pill or whatever, that they have the knowledge and the strength to say no. I'm sure the schools are doing something, and I don't know what that is, so I should look into that because I clearly don't know what that is. But anyway, thank you very much. And I would say, when I hear gunshots on the BPA trail, it's scary because you don't know where they're coming from. And I can understand when the public is afraid because you don't know where they're coming from. You don't know if they're coming towards your house. If your car has been stolen, we've had a car stolen. I mean, that's such a violation of your space. And I can completely understand when our citizens and our residents and our businesses are as upset as they are. So, but thank you, and I appreciate all that you do. Maybe
I could add a little bit. Obviously, it's not just all schools' responsibility. There's rules in schools. If a student brings a gun, now with the current law, they have to be booked into juvenile detention. They have to see a psychologist before they come back to school or whatever. If they bring a weapon, I believe they're suspended, for that school year. So there's consequences. What I would tell you is that there's huge forces out in our society right now. We're living in a gun culture. We have youth that are carrying guns. The media today, I'm talking television, the media, whatever the information that kids are absorbing in right now. I mean, there's tremendous forces about firearm and violence. And so they're getting influence. Obviously, parents, mentors, they all have to play a role, but in some aspect, we're not doing a very good job as a society. And of course, it could bleed into schools, but it all starts as a community. And I'm telling you that, yeah, we have a problem. And, we have to continue to work towards it, what that is.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chief. Director Groom, did you want to complete the presentation?
I would. Thank you. I will try to be brief and make efficient use of your time. The chief brought us to this slide that has the estimated costs, and this has been in your packet already. And I think all of these costs correlate to all of the objectives and the strategies that he's been talking about. I will point out that some of these, like the hiring bonuses and the patrol vehicles, all have to do with not only the measurable outcomes that he's trying to achieve, but also recruitment and retention. So I won't spend any more time on that. My role here is to take from where the chief leaves us to the question, can we fund it? And I think many folks have seen these slides before. I'll try to be brief, but some people haven't. So this is a pretty significant cost. And the big question is well, there are four questions. We've worked together to evaluate the possibilities, and we've had a team to come up with two feasible solutions. I know that as a governing body, we do need to make sure that we cover the questions. Then the first question is, how do we find extra money? Just like you, I get asked can we find more money? And there's generally no such thing, because in every budget process, every penny has already been allocated somewhere in the budget. And I wasn't here to balance the last budget, but every budget is generally always hard to balance. If there was any extra money, it sure would have helped. But the way we find extra money is we look at savings, we look at unbudgeted revenues, we look at grant funding, and we look at future budgets. And here we have broken out the revenue and expense assumptions down month by month to try to get to ways to ramp up in the various activities that the chief is talking: purchase of the vehicles and hiring of personnel. So I can't say that we found extra money, but we have made sure that we have kept within our means. I've also worked to uphold the integrity of the city, and that means balancing the full budget vetting process versus making little course correcting changes. And this is not a little change. Because we adopted a budget that was the city's highest priorities at the time, we do want to honor that, not override that process, and not shortcut the next budget process. So while we're trying to uphold the city's integrity, most of the time we're going to want to capture new requests and put them through the complete budget process, the complete budget vetting process that we use to consider citywide resources and needs. But you as a governing body also have the option to say that something is important enough to act on immediately. And you want to know the budget consequences to next year. And just like when we talked earlier, when we're talking ARPA, why would we be willing to even consider ARPA is something so important and so compelling. I think the chief has given you the information on that. My job then is just to say, well, okay, if that's true, how do we pay for it? So the second question then is, are there current year savings? And within the current budget, we're 8 months into the current year. We almost have the books closed on 9 months, not quite. And we do have two identified things within the police department's budget that will get us part way. The current jail cost is under budget, and we expect we need to get the jail cost budget back to get back to normal, just to be prudent. But there's about $1 million in the current year and $500,000 forecasted next year. After that, it would just be cautious and conservative to expect savings to decline and not count on them any farther in the future. We also do have savings from vacancies. That's from open positions that can be redeployed within the police budget itself. We have existing vacancies, which the chief is already working on right now on filling. I didn't look to 2021 savings simply because I was able to solve the puzzle without it. But the police department working right now to recruit for current vacancies. This proposal would then fill positions beyond existing openings. I'm forecasting that by the first few months of 2022, there would really only be about $123,000 of savings that we would apply, and then that would diminish, and then we would get into new territory. Question 3 is there any new revenue? I want to be careful about calling it new revenue when what I really mean is unbudgeted. But the fact is, we certainly were cautious because of the pandemic's economic uncertainty. Sales tax revenue is coming in better than budgeted this year. That was smart budgeting then, and that helps us now. We update our revenue forecast every single month when it comes in. And what we know now is about half of the positive variance we have right now would get us where we need to be through 2022. I have a graph that I'm sure that I've shown you before, just to orient anyone that hasn't seen this graph before. This is the current year's cumulative sales tax that comes into the city. The red line is the current cumulative. The thin blue line is last year's actual, and the gray shaded area is the current year's budget. And as you can see, we budgeted exactly flat with last year. The current favorable revenue is a positive pickup this year. And so what I'm proposing for this is if we commit about half going forward and we still forecast conservatively, that gives us an option to fund what the chief is asking for. Notice that the scale on this chart is 16 million by the end of the year, and we're running favorably. At the moment, so far in the year, we have 916,000 positive variance through August. So going forward, in future years, we always try to be cautious. I'm not projecting optimistic growth rates. In fact, when we're looking at this proposal, I'm cutting the probable growth rate in half just to be cautious. The fourth question is, what about future budgets that are impacted by adding staff and vehicles? And I think I've said this before, but for anyone that hasn't heard this, I think it's pretty fundamental. Let's say we buy a police vehicle. We usually call that a capital expense, and we talk about capital expenditures as one-times. We don't buy a car monthly or annually, though. We buy patrol cars to last 7 or 8 years. But the moment we buy that car, we in finance divide the cost of that car by 8 years that it'll last, and we want to put away, as we budget going forward, 1/8 of the cost into the budget every year in the future to fund its replacement. So when we're talking expanding the fleet, that's a little bit different than replacing existing vehicles. It does obligate our future budget, but the expansion itself is a one-time. An expansion of staff is also a long-term commitment. So when we look at that sales tax revenue, we have to ask ourselves, can we expand our fleet and our staff and all the other demands on the general fund? And we see every year with inflation and new demands for services, will this be a priority in the next budget? Again, we come back to the question, is this compelling? And that's where the chief has given us that ammunition. So the future annual price tag here, the new run rate of the staffing cost and vehicle replacement is just above 1.6 million when we include the replacement cost. Sales tax is on track to increase 1.8 million over the prior year, and the following year, we think it'll continue. So I'm calling the two options that I have found the hard way and the easy way. ARPA's $19 million will make the city better and should bring some relief to the city budget. I believe staff brings an ARPA work session next week, and you'll see, folks, all the suggestions that are brought to us could spend ARPA twice over, so then it becomes a matter of prioritizing. Still, if we apply ARPA funds to this problem, that makes my job easier short term, but I'm not neglecting the long term either. But I really tried first to make sure I could solve the problem without using ARPA funds. That's how I came up with the other option to redeploy jail cost savings, vacancy savings, and sales tax revenue that's coming in over budget. I think we are being very careful when we consider ARPA, and Treasury distributed the money quickly, but federal audits are, I use FEMA as the best known example of audits that take money back. So anything that we use ARPA for, we want to be very cautious and be really sure that we're going to be audit ready. So when I compare the two different options, here's what the dollars look like. Some people want to see the numbers. The next slide uses pie charts, but I created this to give you a table of numbers. There's two sets of columns, with ARPA and without ARPA. Both show 3 years. 2022 is the current budget cycle, and the following 2 years is the next budget cycle. The rows labeled on the left show both the funding sources at the top and the expenses at the bottom, and the expenses at the bottom are the same in either case. What this shows is two possible funding sources. With ARPA, expenses are covered, about $2 million of the ARPA funding. That would cover the patrol cars. You can see how I've correlated the yellow revenue with the yellow funding with the yellow expenses. And as you can see, by 2024, we need to plan for the future sales tax revenue anyway, being obligated in the next budget cycle. In option 2, without ARPA, in this option, we use jail savings accumulated in 2021 and projected into 2022, which, with a little recognition of better than budgeted sales tax, would allow ARPA to remain untapped for now, and we could pivot later if we wanted to. Jail savings is not a revenue per se, but it's in the police department's budget already. They could just redirect it. But in this scenario, you would direct staff to come back with a budget amendment for $478,000 in the current budget cycle, recognizing sales tax for 2022, committing it to be spent on this proposal. Essentially, the difference is how we pay for the vehicles. Notice, please, that in either case, 2024 puts us back relying on general fund revenues. So what we're saying that this is going to be a priority then as well. Here's the same thing shown with pie charts, 2022 and the current budget cycle in the following 2 years. Gray in this case is sales tax. Blue is jail cost savings, yellow is ARPA. Either way, using jail cost savings or ARPA, that allows us to save elsewhere, but not in the long run, not by 2024. Both of these options assume that we approve the staffing and the vehicles, and what I've come up with is two different options to get us through the initial cost of the vehicles. In option one, no budget amendment would be needed. We would need to plan for the future sales tax being obligated to the next budget cycle. Option two is the option we would need you to direct staff to come back with a budget amendment for $478,000 in the current budget. And that would be recognizing sales tax to supplement jail cost savings. I'm just about to the end, I think. Yep, either way can work as long as our eyes are fully open to what we're committing to in future budgets. If we wanted to demonstrate that we're using ARPA funding for urgent and important uses, I think we can make an argument for vehicle purchases. We might want to be hesitant to spend a penny of ARPA without knowing how the whole thing is prioritized. I think we've talked about that. Master planning does give us confidence to proceed with each piece. So the question would be, do you think this is going to be a priority no matter what? That said, ARPA aims specifically to help cities be more resilient, more fiscally sustainable, and using ARPA assistance as a one-time help makes a lot of sense. I think we will be able to end up justify using it for vehicles if we've counted the future budget impact. So I think for us, the policy question for me, it isn't so much about ARPA as whether and how soon we want to obligate future budget revenue. Next steps are to consider approving the staff, vehicles, and recruitment, and to direct staff to bring a budget amendment if you want to go option one, or approve the staff, vehicles, and recruitment, and to direct staff to commit ARPA funding if you approve option two. And ARPA has been mentioned quite a bit. The mayor has had us working on it. Staff has been looking at multiple uses, and this is included in that. And with that, here's the summary slide that I think shows the considerations that both the chief and I have brought to you, showing his objectives and the considerations that I've brought. And the mayor's recommendation, and it's in your packet and it's also on this slide, it's to consider approving option one, committing ARPA revenue for vehicle purchases. That would require no further budget amendment since we have existing current year savings that would cover everything else. And that brings us to the end of the presentation. The chief and I are both here to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Grimm. Council member, chair, council committee members, sorry. Any questions? Seeing none, Council President Honda.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. With the shortage of vehicles being available for sale because of the missing chips or whatever they're called, are police cars available for purchase? Will it be difficult to purchase all these vehicles at one time?
You know, I haven't heard that. Obviously, I've heard about the vehicle shortage, but when we've ordered vehicles, sometimes you have to wait a few months. For 2022 vehicles, you have to almost order now to take delivery in the first quarter of next year. So, but I've never heard of not having enough cars that we could purchase. So I think there was a little bit of delay a while back, but we've been able to order and we got the vehicles coming in. So I don't think that'll be a problem.
And I can piggyback on that. I've been talking to my finance community because we've been concerned that flooding the entire nation with ARPA money is that going to add demand? And I have not been hearing that. And the chief is exactly right. We've always known that there's a lead time issue for approving vehicles, and so I think that adds to his urgency in bringing this matter here. I think he's looking to get the approval to get them ordered, and so I've got two options. We can make it work.
So even without the additional staff hired, because that in itself could take a while, correct? We would go ahead and have the cars ordered and just waiting for the staff, or we would hire, train, order the car when they're hired, or how would that go? Because that would be a difference in how the money is needed.
With 137 officers, we would need to order 15 cars to get to 137. The other 13 vehicles, it's not our plan to order them all right away. We would order 5 vehicles in 2023. So it's kind of split up. But we would order some vehicles for 2022. Just to give you an idea, just the other day we were down 11 and we are now down to 7. So we've been hiring. We have a couple more laterals in the process now. So we would order anticipating that we would have certain number of positions by a certain time. We wouldn't order all 28 at once.
How long do you think it will take to find qualified people to reach 150?
If council authorizes $20,000 hiring bonus for laterals, $2,000 for entry level, which we already have for that, take home vehicles, my staff is anticipating 18 months from now to be fully staffed, but that could really change depending on environment. There are a couple of variables that are at play, but we would press really hard to hire people as quickly as we can, just get them in the pipeline. There's a academy waiting time, there's academy time, there's training time. As long as we have people lined up every month, we would be, the idea is we get new people on the street. But that's where we're at. So it is a priority for our department, but my staff says 18, but I think we can do it sooner. And maybe with some luck, sooner.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions, Council? Well, thank you, Chief Wong, and thank you, Director Groom, for an excellent presentation. I'm wondering, in our motion, if we, Chief Wong, you might want to answer this, instead of having it on the consent agenda, would you like us to move it to the business agenda so that you can make your presentation at the next council meeting?
Yeah, it's my understanding that the mayor and council president has already moved it to council business. I will be making a similar presentation with Director Groom next week.
Okay, so the motion then should say move it to the business section of the agenda. Because right now the committee recommendation is to move it to the consent agenda. Okay, all right. Do I hear a motion from the committee members? Councilmember Baruso.
Chair Kuchma, I'm sorry. I had a question for Chief real quick.
You
if
bet.
I can go back. Thank you.
Sure.
Let me put my hand down first. Just real quick, Chief, on your laterals that you bring in, do you do any type of, I don't know, specific department training? How long does that take?
Probably 2 to 3 weeks to train them on our policies, firearm training, use of force training, defensive tactics training. So we provide a variety of different training. And then at some point within the 6-month period, if they're from out of state, they have to go to a equivalency academy at CJTC, which is 2-week course that they have to pass.
Okay. Yeah, because I know that makes a difference too, how quick you get them on the street. So I was just kind of curious. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make the motion. Chair Kuchma.
Thank you.
I move to forward to propose. Oh, okay. I move to forward to propose using option 1 to October 19, 2021 consent agenda for approval.
Business.
Could we amend that to
yes.
read business?
That should be business.
Section item
That's what it was too. Yeah.
for approval.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councilmember Sabadasan. It's been moved and seconded to move this forward to the next on the business agenda for the next meeting on October the 19th. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you so much. Council President, did you have your hand in the air there for a minute?
I did. I was just, I just wanted to make sure that option 1 is using the ARPA money and not the sales tax revenue. So.
Yeah, it said that. Yeah, we're good.
Okay. All right.
Thanks. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. All right. Well, now we're moving to the final item on the agenda. It is now 7:33 p.m., which is item G, Ordinance Revising Federal Revised Code 6.35.030, Pedestrian Interference, and Miss Idy, our newly minted attorney here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Kochmar. Not a newly minted attorney, but newly minted here. So, so thank you very much for that.
Here.
I know
here.
that we, thanks. I know that it's late, and so it's hard for me to be the closer. I'm so sorry. To follow that presentation is going to be a little rough, but hopefully I can make this as painless as possible, and we can get through the information quickly. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen really quick here, and hopefully everything will work. Just a moment. Okay. Can you all see my screen? Nod if you can.
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. Okay. So Chair Kochmar, council members, and council president, I'm Joanna Ide, as you heard, and I'm here to present to you the proposed changes to the pedestrian interference code. The question for you tonight is whether to forward consideration of these changes to first reading at the October 19th council meeting. So just a quick bit of background here, and I need to click on the right spot on my screen here. There we go. Okay, so city regulates public property under the state constitution and statute. So this includes authority over city property and parks, public rights of way, and areas within the rights of way, such as sidewalks and benches, as you well know. The pedestrian interference code was enacted years ago with modifications over time. So we've seen several different iterations of this over time, and as updates to the law have been necessary. The city has received concerns from members of the public regarding safe and effective use of public rights of way and areas within that right of way, like sidewalks and benches. In response, the city is proposing changes to address public safety and usage concerns. You might recall City Attorney Ryan Call recently speaking on this issue and the availability of making some changes to this section of code in particular, as well as the general legal parameters of doing so as well, especially in consideration for people experiencing homelessness. So all people may use areas within the public right of way, including sidewalks, benches, and medians, as a person normally would, and in a way that doesn't interfere with the use of the public at large. But when conduct obstructs traffic, roadways, pedestrian travel, and other lawful uses of these areas, it may be prohibited due to its prevention of the use of others, or because it can create safety hazards and present risks to public health and safety, not only for other people, but for that person who's engaging in that conduct, which we certainly want to address. So the existing code, it just briefly just to show the comparison of what it is currently and what we're proposing, is as it stands today, it's focused on vehicle traffic primarily, but of course there is pedestrian components in here too. But when you actually read through the language, it is very focused on vehicle traffic. It does make it a misdemeanor for a person while in the public right of way to intentionally obstruct pedestrian or vehicular traffic by walking, standing, sitting, lying, or placing an object in a manner to block pedestrians or vehicle operators. It also defines roadways, same in state law, and it only exempts persons engaged in development, maintenance, and construction type of work. So that's important because we have some more exemptions that we are actually carving out of this in the proposed amendment. So with the proposed ordinance, this is adding detail to ensure sidewalks and other areas within the public rights of way are not obstructed and may be used by the public as they are intended. We did add a definition for sidewalk for clarity. It's similar to the included definition of roadway, and sidewalk was already defined within the Federal Way Revised Code. So we are just using that definition here just to make sure things are very clear. And for clear enforceability, those definitions are usually really important. We've also proposed added language to broaden existing language in new subsection 2A. There's some reorganization here regarding blocking the right of way to ensure it functions as intended and does not require actual blocking or evasive actions to occur for a person to meet the elements of the offense. This avoids having a hazard be actually hazardous in order for it to be a violation of the section. So meaning if I have placed something upon the roadway and I end up not tripping over it, as it's currently written, there might be a question as to whether or not that would be enforceable. We don't want to have that result happen. So it also, the proposed language creates clear exemptions to restrictions for people with disabilities, activities within an issued permit, and others. And those are important because we don't necessarily, we want to make sure that this is like technically sound as well as going towards the intended usage, right? Okay. So continuing along with the proposed ordinance, the changes proposed here are explicitly prohibiting laying or sitting in the sidewalk. So that is newly proposed language that is more explicit around that area. It also addresses the use of bus benches to protect their intended purpose and availability to members of the general public. These changes are designed in light of current case law, just so that's very, very clear, written with the Martin v. Boise Ninth Circuit decision in mind, and as far as possible within that, ensuring that we are following current case law. That decision prohibits general prohibitions on camping in a jurisdiction, but stated that more narrow restrictions would be permissible. So no blanket prohibitions. That's not something that is appropriate underneath the Constitution. For example, other cities within Washington have followed this narrow kind of carve out, if you will, by choosing to prohibit sitting or lying in certain zones of the city, such as a downtown core or commercial district, where others have prohibited it at certain times of the day, such as between the hours of like 6 a.m. and 9 p.m., but not at other times. In the case of the proposed amendments at hand here, we have confined the prohibition to certain areas. So that's the public rights of way and specific areas within that right of way. So that follows kind of the zone mentality or the area mentality. We've also proposed clarifying existing language for increased organization and enforceability. And these changes really would aim to ensure these public areas are able to be safely used by the general public according to their intended uses. So quickly on enforcement here. Violation of the section remains a misdemeanor, but with an added provision that a person violating this section receives notice that their conduct is in violation of the code, and that if they refuse to discontinue that conduct, that they will be subject to a misdemeanor. This notice requirement prior to enforcing the violation was added to provide people an opportunity to correct that conduct, avoiding unintentional consequences, and to reflect some officer discretion as well. This also seemed to be appropriate given some of the conduct that not necessarily happening within Federal Way, but just generally on the landscape. So regarding unintentional consequences, for instance, we don't want to have kids selling lemonade on the sidewalk being technically guilty of a misdemeanor, right? So this is part of the reason why we wanted to have one of those. I know that's kind of a very, basic example, but I think it illustrates the point. I think an important thing to note here, of course, at the end of the enforcement component is equal application. Restrictions on use must be equally applied to all people, regardless of status, to remain within constitutional protections for equal application of the law. People experiencing homelessness, as well as many other people, are considered citizens and afforded the same protections under law as any other person. Where that conduct by any person becomes a concern is when it reaches the level where it causes threats to public health, safety, or welfare of that person or for members of the public, or interferes with use and enjoyment by other members of the public. That conduct is the intended target of these proposed amendments to the code. We have had the chief of enforcement, and we had him just present a few moments ago, and our chief prosecutor reviewed the proposed changes as well. And I think that is it as far as my presentation. I know I talked a little fast there, but I wanted to make sure that we covered everything. I'm happy to answer questions or try to answer questions if I don't have it right in front of me. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kath. Are there any questions? Committee members, I see only Council President Honda has her hand up.
Oh, sorry, I feel like I talk a lot. Miss Heidi, how many times would a person be warned before they were cited?
Underneath how this is currently written,
Uh-huh.
only once. It's only, they would be warned, and if they refuse to comply with that, then they would be cited, potentially be cited with a misdemeanor.
And how would a police officer know that they'd already been warned once?
So that question might actually be really good for the chief to respond to, but of course this is going to be something that different officers, it's going to depend upon the different scenarios at play, right? As the officer is out contacting people in the field. But I don't want to speak within the chief's turf here, so I will hand that question over to him.
Thank you.
Yeah, Council President, first of all, I would tell you that we don't really anticipate making, too many arrests with particular ordinance. Even today, if an officer makes contact with individuals and just persuasion, ask them to move on, typically that's how it's resolved. I would tell you that even if you give somebody warning at a bus stop, it's a public place. So what kind of mechanism would we have? We wouldn't. Each incident would be itself. Now, if the same officer went each time and recognized a person or they're making that their home, clearly at some point, and they refuse to leave, then we may, it gives us, I guess, a tool to give us more footing to enforce it. But in the real world, I just think just having that in our books and having that ability gives officers a little more confidence when we ask officers, hey, would you ask 3 or 4 people that are just living there or in the shopping, would you have them move on? Officers will do it, but if they flat out just said, no, I ain't going, that this would become, how important is it for the policy group? How important is it for the community that we actually enforce this? And if the communities and the policy group says it's important, then it gives the officer the tools to push the envelope if it needed. But we would do everything we possibly could not to make the physical arrest. We just want them to not occupy that space where average person can't sit there and wait for the bus, or they don't absolutely feel comfortable doing it.
Okay, I would assume that the goal would be education and trying to get people to cooperate instead of trying to give someone a citation, because if they're homeless, they probably wouldn't end up show up in court anyway, or have the ability to pay a fine. I do know that the bus stop over by the mall, in front of the mall by the chicken wing place, for the last few days, I can't think of the name of that restaurant, I'm so sorry, has been, I've seen a number of people who might be homeless who are using it as a shelter, it appears to be. And I don't know if that has been reported to anyone, but even today, it looked like there were people there that were using it as a shelter. So.
Is it a side street there off 320th?
It's on 320th. It's on 320th. Yeah.
Talking Buffalo Wild Wings.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. I couldn't remember the name.
Chicken. It must be Buffalo Wild Wings.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you.
So you can see the value of having a bicycle unit at some point, particularly our downtown core. We would get to know, the homeless. Maybe we could provide them resources, that type of thing. But just having officers contact and saying, hey, you can't, sleep or live out of this bus stop. And, and 99.9% of the time, people will comply. It's just that if it really came down to somebody says, I'm not moving, it makes the officers more comfortable making that contact too, as well.
A question about the bicycle unit. Do we still have the bicycles that we had before, or do those have to be purchased again?
We do have bicycles. We have bicycle, officers. So we do have that. It just, they have certain life cycle. We have some electric bikes as well. So, the technology changes and that type of thing. But we did have a robust bicycle unit after we had 2 back-to-back homicide murders at the transit center. We instituted a bicycle unit, and they did make a really positive impact. And I've been really monitoring crime in the downtown area. We haven't seen like any changes over the years, but I'm really excited about the possibility of having that vision of, okay, here's what it's going to look like, as a policy group and as a police, here's what it's going to look like, and we work towards it. So that'll be exciting piece.
Okay, thank you. Hi, kitty
Thank you.
cat.
Councilmember Barroso?
Sorry, I'm looking at the cat too. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair Rochmar.
What is that?
It's for cat, I think. Anyway, thank you, Joanna, for the presentation. And Chief, could you clarify something again on the jurisdiction of the elevated light rail when it comes to that? Whose jurisdiction is that when it's when it's in our city limits? What this ordinance would kick in?
Yeah, I think they'll have security personnel there. They're not going to have, deputies on site. So at the end of the day, if there's crime or problems, the residents are going to come to you all and the police chief to address. So even though it's not our facility, we're not expecting Sound Transit to have deputies there patrolling all the time. They will have security there, but just like Transit Center. But if something happens there, we own it. So, long term, strategically, this is what we're envisioning because we're going to need to. It's in our city, so it's our responsibility.
Okay, thank you.
Well, okay. Do I hear a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
I move to forward the proposed ordinance to first reading on October 19th, 2021.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to move the ordinance forward. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Heidi, for your wonderful presentation. Good job. And Chief Wong, are we going to have a presentation for the two officers that were awarded the Medal of Honor by the governor at the next meeting?
I hear I can certainly, because it's virtual, I'm not so sure exactly how.
Oh, sure, how that would work.
One of the officers did leave the law enforcement profession, so how would that?
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you're frozen, ma'am. So.
I'll just leave it up to you. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Okay. Seeing none, then we are adjourned at 7:51 p.m. Thank you all so much for being here this evening for this long meeting. See y'all.
Thank you for a great meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye now. Bye, Mary.
Good night.
Good, Mary.
Bye.
Good night.